Why wasn't I more kind? Where was my radical love? Did I do enough? It was an ordinary Thursday morning in my house of 7 with 5 school-aged, overscheduled children. I was involved in my normal morning multitasking where I was cooking breakfast, packing lunches, checking backpacks, and giving directives. My 13-year-old son had recently been diagnosed with anxiety, and normal situations were now seen as unsurmountable obstacles. I was always his champion, his go-to person, his rock. I understood him. Actually, there's a little of him in me. But as his anxiety increased and his irrational reactions grew more and more, and as his black male body got taller and took up more space, and I saw so many moms losing their black sons at the hands of others, my everyday ordinary concerns began to manifest as paralyzing fear. On this ordinary Thursday morning, my son came to me and said, "Mom, I forgot to do one of my homework assignments that's due today." I said, "Well, do what you can in the car and turn in what you have." I could tell he was getting upset, and I saw his anxiety starting to rise. But I thought he can use some of the strategies that he's been learning, and he can work it out by himself while I finish up the morning routine. As we start piling in the car heading for school, I noticed he was missing. So I honked my horn several times and he didn't come out, and I felt my anger starting to rise. And so I got out of the car and I went back into the house and I went to his room to tell him to get in the car, and I didn't see him. My anger was turning into stress. I was running around the house calling his name, and all I heard was silence. And my stress is now turning into that paralyzing fear. And that inner mean girl, she started waking up. "You're a terrible mom," she said to me. "You knew he was struggling. You knew he was struggling. Why didn't you plug in?" Why didn't I plug in? Why didn't I listen to him? As I run to my bedroom, the only room left in the house to check, he wasn't there. And so I fell down on my knees, tears streaming down my face, and I said, "Why wasn't I more kind? Where was my radical love? Did I do enough?" Home should be a safe place, a place where every child is heard and valued and unconditionally loved. In 2017 and 2018, Huffington Post, Time Magazine, and Psychology Today, they took a poll and they asked parents, "What are your greatest fears for your children?" Consistently, some of those answers included my child being safe in the world, my child being attacked or bullied, or my child growing up with a sense of privilege and not enough compassion. The same question was asked children about their greatest fears, and their responses included gun safety, violence, bullying, and domestic abuse. What if we can change those fears into something more positive? What if we could work together so that every child felt safe and secure and a sense of radical love? Paulo Freire defines radical love as an act of courage, not fear, an openness to see others, to hear others. Every child has a story, especially those children who've been marginalized or who have been silenced in some way. Radical love is the commitment to dialogue, the commitment to listen. What if, as former President Barack Obama said, "We are the ones we're waiting for"? We are the change that we seek. On that ordinary Thursday morning on the floor in my bedroom, I was parenting from my fears. My son, my black teenage son, full of anxiety and possible irrational thinking and wearing a hoodie, was now walking or running somewhere in my predominantly white neighborhood. I was afraid. I was living in paralyzing fear, and I needed some way to change that fear. Social justice parenting is a result of that transformation. I want you to think about if you are interested in social justice parenting, all you have to do is remember one word, and that word is rocks. No, it doesn't make sense right now, but follow along. Imagine, if you will, a stream or a flow of water in a river. And in that stream represents fear, your fears and your children's fears. Now, if we take that river and we put rocks of radical love in the middle of that river, it can transform fear. Radical love has rippling and expansive ways of transforming fear. Radical love rocks. Reflection, open dialogue, compassion, kindness, and social engagement. Let's start with the rocks. Reflection. I'm going to begin by asking you to reflect on your own experiences, your own childhood memories, ways that you are privileged, ways that you may feel marginalized, and think about the impact that this has on your life and the life of your children if you're a parent. Self-reflection is essential in social justice parenting. I often reflect on my own childhood memories and their impact on my parenting. For example, one thing that I remember, my dad, who was, he came of age during the Jim Crow era, and he would say to me, "Don't trust white people. Don't trust white people." I mean, you saw my family picture. You think I listened to that, right? Hey, babe. But for me as a young child growing up in a all-white neighborhood, my family was the only black family in my neighborhood at that time, and this brought a lot of angst to me as a young child. But it wasn't until I was a young adult that I recognized the context in which his perceptions and his fears were shaped. You, as a parent, need to think about your privileges and how we convey those to our children. In my house, we openly, intentionally unpack power and privilege and how it's situated in the world and where my children fit into that. I once had a coaching client who said to me, "I just want to keep my kids in a bubble. I just want to protect them from anything bad that's going on out there. Why can't I keep their innocence as long as I can?" And my response to her was simple. Aren't you lucky you get to choose? There are so many children that don't get the privilege of living in that bubble, not even for 1 minute. Truth, it can't happen in that bubble. Social justice parenting is about us stepping outside of that bubble to teach our kids about others and reflecting on our lives and what we have or don't have and how we can build relationships with our children, with other people. O. O is for open dialogue. Sometimes we have to have those hard conversations with ourselves and with our children. Black feminist scholar Bell Hooks says, openness and honesty are the foundation for insightful dialogue. Now, I'm not telling you you're always going to know the right thing to say to your children. Some of these topics are hard topics, and I'm not telling you you're always going to say the right thing. But your children need to see that. They need to see that you don't always have the answers. They need to see you open and honest and vulnerable and full of emotions and constructive ways of dealing with those emotions. Open dialogue is also about listening to our children's voices and affirming those voices. If we thought about the power differential between parent and child, and we let that get in the way of listening to our children, they slowly lose the power to hear their voices, and they lose the power to use it in the real world. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to silence our children. C is for compassion. Having compassion for yourself, having compassion for others, and modeling compassion to our children is essential. Sometimes my family, we will pay for the person behind us in line, and my kids get so excited every time we do it. They think they are changing. They're changing the lives of the people that they are paying for. It's a very small gesture. Having compassion for others is something easy to do, but it has to be modeled. One of the things that we do in our house, because it's really about teaching kids to see others and see others' perspectives, we call it owning your own junk. And so what that means is when my children come to me and they like to tattletale about what their sibling did or what their dad did or somebody at school, my first response is, wait a minute, own your own junk first. So they have to then go back and take ownership into their position or their part in whatever thing they're trying to tell me. So this teaches them that there's more than one perspective. Kindness. Kindness is the extension of compassion into an action, a doing, a practice. Acts of kindness are more than just, they touch lives more than just the recipients of the kindness, but it really adds value to the lives of your children. It teaches them to make kindness permanent in their lives. One time, my family and I were in a drive-through line, and the person behind us was blowing her horn, and she was screaming that we were taking too long. And listen, we got 5 kids, so we do take long. And I don't know about your kids, but we go through the same drive-through, and they have to look at the menu like it's a new menu. So I felt her. But when I got to the window, I asked the cashier to pay my bill and pay the bill of the lady behind us. And my kids were like, I can't believe you're paying her bill. She was so rude. And I said, yes, but maybe she needs a little love and kindness today, and we're in a position to give it to her. And as we drove off to the red light, the woman drove next to us, and she said, thank you and God bless. And so my kids got to see radical love in action. That radical love wins. It's about filling their cups with things that are positive and things that are lasting, making kindness permanent over time. The final building block is social engagement. Social engagement is the pathway to activism. If we look back in time, we will see that there's so many groups of children that made lasting, permanent changes in our society in spite of fear or walking through fear. For example, in the 1960s civil rights movement, you have the Children's Crusade. They were the ones that were marching, they were being jailed, they were sitting in, they were making a difference for equality. More recently, let's think about the students at Stoneman Douglas High School here in Parkland, Florida. They stepped out of their fear into their activist greatness. I was so awed by their courage and their leadership. If we are to raise children who are going to be leaders and changing the world, it all starts with radical love. That Thursday in my house, on the floor in my bedroom, I thought I had failed my son. But 30 minutes later, I saw him. He was walking right outside our neighborhood. I was so happy to see him. And I pulled my car over and rolled the window down, and he said, "Hey, Mom, I'm sorry. I was so worried about this homework and the impact that it was going to have on my grade. I got so upset, and I needed some space to walk it off. I had my phone on me the whole time. I'm okay, but I'm sorry." And at that moment, I realized that the social justice parenting that my husband and I have used over the years had really set in. He was reflecting on his own behavior and the impact that it had on others. He was engaged in open dialogue with me, talking to me about his fears, and he was compassionate and kind. Kind to me by telling me he was sorry, and kind to himself by allowing himself to kind of let out a little steam. I hope tonight that something that I said resonates with you tonight, that we can take fear, that river of fear, and we can transform it. We can transform it to radical love. So my thoughts for you tonight, when you leave here, if you can ask yourself similar questions to the questions that I asked myself that ordinary Thursday morning on the floor in my bedroom, how can you be more kind? How can you model radical love? Are you doing enough? I hope the answers to your questions guide you in your parenting and in your life. Thank you.